Hello, Megan Brasser. How are you today?
Hi, I'm hanging in there. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm very interested in hearing all about your story. We're going to dive right into it, but let me just give a little context for people watching. So, Megan, you and your family have been experiencing a real ordeal for the past number of years in what can only be really described as lawfare against your husband in particular. That has now led to a point where he is about to start a prison sentence, a year-long prison sentence on January 15th, which is what, 2 days from now? 2 days
Yes,
from now.
yes.
And so I came up, I heard of your story through a friend, and it really had some striking parallels to me. In particular, to Donald Trump's fraud case that was prosecuted out of New York, in which he was convicted of defrauding the banks that said that he had not defrauded them, and yet they pursued the lawfare against him. And of course, he's made lawfare, the word lawfare, famous because he's been subjected to it so much. But what we don't often hear about is how it's also used against ordinary citizens, ordinary American citizens who, for a multitude of reasons, get caught up in or caught in the sights of the federal prosecution system. And once you're in there, it's very, very hard, if not impossible, to escape. And that I'd always heard that actually, but your family is sort of living proof of that. So, Megan, why don't you just start at the beginning of the story? First of all, tell us where you are, and yes, just start at the beginning of the story.
Okay, sure. So we live in Charlotte, North Carolina. We've lived here our entire marriage for about 26 years. My husband's I describe him as a unicorn. He's a very unique person. I don't know anybody like him. I call him the jack of all trades, master of all. When I met him, he was a touring golfer. I believe it was the Australian PGA and the Asian PGA. And he went on to when we first got married and started having children. We have 4 children. He opened a company called Targeted Golf, which is what I now call it was Top Golf before 20 years ago, where you'd hit balls
Wow.
into a screen. And he's just very much ahead of his time. He's an innovator. He really is just jack of all trades, master of all. And he's not just like a genius in one area. He's a commercial pilot, aerobatic pilot. He's gone to Harvard to get his MBA. That was just recently. He's very good at art. He's good at everything except the kids and I tease him he's bad at baseball. According to his sister.
Okay.
He's kind of into everything because he never sits down and he's just an overachiever just beyond that. And I think the way this case started may have been, people couldn't believe this guy was really all those things and that he must be some
Maybe.
sort of charlatan, and none of this is true. But the more you
Okay.
dig in, the more you see, oh, yeah, he really has been at the Inc. 500 conference and been a speaker and sat at the dinner table with Elon Musk. Like, he's the real deal.
Wow. Can I wait before you go on? Can I ask how you guys met?
Yeah, so we met in Chicago in 1996, just totally randomly during I was visiting my cousin who is a model in Chicago for Elite. She's now a very successful actress in Hollywood, but she just introduced me to a group. We went to a sushi restaurant one night and there was about 10, 12 people and I happened to sit next to Richard and I, I was a beverage cart girl in college at the time, and he was a pro golfer. We were also both psychology majors. He'd gotten a degree at UNCW in psychology. And the way he talked about his mom was so endearing because I couldn't figure out how he knew how to eat with chopsticks and so perfectly. And he said every Sunday night they had culture night in his family, and they had to pretend they were from another culture and cook like them
Wow.
and eat like them. And so his mom was so fascinating that before I knew it, we were engaged in a 30-minute conversation. And he was on a date, but it was only the first or second date with somebody else. And the rest is history. Yeah, I didn't know it at all. I said to my cousin, why is your friend glaring at me? And she said, because that's Richard that you're talking about or that you're talking to. we had picked his date up and she was talking all about this guy, Richard. But, I was meeting like 12 people, so I didn't know who I was talking to. And when I figured out it was Richard that I was talking to, I had already had a coat. He'd already wrapped his coat around me because I was cold. So I took off the coat and gave it back to him, and it was just funny. But the next night he asked
Okay.
me out. So, and then we had a long distance relationship for about a year and a half, and then we got engaged, and I finished up school at University of Iowa and then moved down here shortly after I graduated.
Okay. So you guys got married, had 4 kids, settled in Charlotte, and he had this was it a thriving business career or was it sort of a mid
Yes.
what how would you describe it?
Richard was always just super successful in anything adventure he did. So we were, living the life, living the dream from the time we got married in 1999. 2008 was rough on everybody, and we did not escape that. But then, back at it, and we were doing great until about 2004, 2014, 2015, things just started to get really weird. Yeah, really weird. And so I couldn't figure it out. At first, I thought, what's going on with me? Got a therapist. What's going on with him? Why is he not closing any of these deals? Why, the his business board at his company was being very hostile to him, which didn't make any sense, cutting off his salary and
At
treating
his
him
company.
at his company. And so it was just very, like, we couldn't make sense of what was going on, but we just kept trusting that, this is life. He hit some bumps and
Mhm.
he's in the big world. He's working on Wall Street with these guys, getting investors, and this is just how it goes. And so we just kept trusting that everything would, be like it always was eventually soon. And
Mhm.
then his salary was completely cut off, even though it was under contract, and they were just treating him terribly. And I started to call the board the water board because it felt like he was being tortured for no good
Torture.
reason. I mean, they could never do the company without him. He is the magic. And so I would say, I
Was
don't
this
know.
a
I feel like
company that he founded?
yes, it's called R Factor. And so I just kept saying, I feel like they want you to quit. And, but I'm raising 4 babies. I'm not involved at all with the business. It was observation. I love people. So I'm always watching people. But I said, sounds to me like they want you to quit. And he said, they could never run this without me. I am, they don't even understand the product. They don't even understand what it does. And so I said, well, it's your dream. It's your baby. We can sell the house. We had lived in our beautiful dream home since 2000. He had he's a Porsche race car. He grew up doing that with his mother. And so he did have a Porsche race car. And I said, you know what, why don't we sell our only 2 assets? And I'm game for that. Like, Richard and I are one of the number one things we're about is adventure and adaptability. And we just always raised our kids to be super adaptable, and we can live in an apartment,
Mhm.
and if this is your dream, we can make it happen. And so I offered that up. He was kind of jumping on it and talking to our realtor friends and other realtors. We put out an email. He had sold the race car and they were going to come get that, and then 2 nights before the race cars sold and right before we put the house on the market, our house went up in flames while we were sleeping.
It caught fire. So wait,
Yes.
sorry. So you were selling the house for well, you needed the money, but what was the reason that you needed the money? What was where are we on the timeline here?
So we're around 2000, early 2016, we started saying, well, we can't live on nothing. You have to have a salary, but I guess we could live off our assets.
Mhm.
And so, while you're not getting the salary that you need to sustain our lives, I mean, 4
Okay.
kids is a lot.
Yeah.
And so, in 2000, so our fire was September 19th, 2016. We were all at home, asleep in
Wow.
bed. Yeah. And
Wow.
I woke up about an hour after I went to bed, and I honestly, I think it was divine intervention. I sat up straight in bed from a crazy dream, and which has never happened before or since. And
Mm.
I looked out the window while I was laying back down, and I thought the sky's way too bright. And at that time, I still had an alarm clock on my nightstand, and I kept looking at the sky and the time, and it just didn't make sense. Like, it looked like early dawn, and so I tried to go back to sleep, but something kept nagging at me. That doesn't look right. And if your neighbor's house is on fire, you are never going to forgive yourself for not getting up and
Wow.
checking. And so But as soon as I stepped out of bed, we had wood floors and the floors were way too warm. And I just kept walking. And when I walked in the other room where my two youngest children happened to be sleeping on the couch because they'd fallen asleep and I was too lazy to take them up to their own beds, thank God. I walked out and saw them on the couch and I looked out the windows and it was just bright all around and I could see flames shooting out of the garage. And so I just kind of yelled back softly to my husband, "Hey baby, I think there's a fire." I mean, I knew there was a fire. He's a really light sleeper, so it's crazy
Mhm.
that I was the one that woke up. He heard me say that and just like jumped out of bed and thought I was being dramatic. But then I went up to get my furthest child who was all the way upstairs on the other side of the house. And so I went up to get him. And thank God Richard did not open the garage door to check it out because they said he would immediately gone and like flash fired through the house.
Because that's where the fire has started?
Yeah, it was already they said the fire got up to 3,000 degrees out in the garage, which was an attached garage right by where my children were
Mhm.
sleeping. But we have in North Carolina, you have to have 30-minute fireproof door.
Oh.
So we got out just as well. My whole family was let out by Richard, and I was lagging behind with the child on my hip. And I don't know why. I just thought I need to go get my phone to call 911. So I went
Mhm.
back to get it and that's when I saw the flames shooting in through the garage door, and it was just I mean, I kinda just stood there in a daze, like, yeah.
So things are already going poorly, the board is hostile essentially to your husband. You decide to downsize, and right before you put the house on the market, your house goes up in flames,
Yeah, and 2 days before the race car was to be sold. So the
and the race
race
car was in the garage?
Yeah, and the race car is rarely ever in the garage, but my husband had worked on it all weekend for this sale, and so he put it in the garage because it was perfect and clean, and he'd spent the whole weekend working on it. So it's only in the garage, that I mean, it was just so weird that it was
Mhm.
in the garage, but the fire investigator said the fire started around the race car, but it's still undetermined what the cause of the fire was.
That's wild, Megan. That's very weird.
Yeah.
No, so undetermined, how can a fi in this day and age, how can they not determine a cause of a fire? You think that technology or fire science would be advanced enough that it would be almost like very easy to determine a cause of a fire. I mean, what are the causes of fires? Electrical, I mean,
Exactly.
so
So
there's
at the
no
time of
electrical
our
outlets around the
Yeah, at the time of our fire, they asked me and Richard quite a bit, "Do you have any enemies?" No, of course not. We don't
that
have any enemies.
that's interesting.
So I do know they never ordered an arson pack. I know that's on record that an arson pack was never
Oh.
ordered. They initially thought maybe it was a car, a headlight, because there was a recall on
Mhm.
that, but the guy came from that, car it was Audi, and he came and he ruled that out, and they worked with a team of very top professionals around the region. There was an arson investigator there was an electrical investigator there, gas, car. We had the top experts, but, yeah, they at the end of the day, I begged the top expert to go back in and look, and he did find a wire across the car that it's not technically on record, but he would definitely remember this, but he found the wire um, and he said, "This is how it started. It started over your car right here, unless this wire got thrown up here during the investigation." Because the firemen, when they're putting stuff out, they throw everything everywhere. So it messes up an investigation. And the fact that our fire got up to 3,000 degrees was why so much evidence was also destroyed.
Right. How old were your kids at the time?
Our baby was 4 and then 8, 12, and 14. So ages 4
Mm.
to 14. Yeah.
So with the house destroyed essentially, what were your options then? And like at what point did things escalate to being even worse? You'd think this was bad enough, but like
I
it
know.
did get worse.
It got so much worse. I mean, the fire sadly feels like nothing now, which is how much worse this got. So, our neighbors and friends and our family just flooded in with backpacks for the kids, and everybody was just so amazing. Insurance company Chubb, I can't say enough good things about them. It's not an easy process, but they made it as easy as they could. So we got through that year. I begged Richard to leave Charlotte for a while. Something just fell off to me. I begged him to, um, we were spending, our insurance company was spending a fortune on recreating our lives four houses down in a rental. And I looked at what our insurance was spending on the house and the rental furniture, rental towels, all that stuff. And I said, we could live anywhere for a fraction of this cost. And I just really need to get you out of Charlotte. The water board, as I called them, was just, there's just something not right. So we went overseas for about 3 months, and he tried to work in London, Paris, all these places where the technology was up and coming and they loved his software, but he kept getting board calls from home to just randomly take up his time. So finally, he just said, we've
Mhm.
got to go back home. I don't know. There's fires to put out at work. I don't know what their problem is. So then we moved back and lived near my family in Colorado for 9 months. And then that's when things got really crazy. We had our storage unit. So that the stuff we had bought after the fire, we put in a storage unit while we left, and all that got burglarized. And so now my family and I are thinking, there's just no way you can have this many things go wrong in a row in the same short time. But, we got the police involved here in Charlotte. We got our insurance back involved. They did make 2 arrests of the
Mhm.
burglars. One died right after he got out of jail, and we got a couple things back. And then, so that was strange. At the same time, we're living in Colorado, we get word from some people involved in Richard's company that were on the vendor side buying his product to use. They ended up revealing that there was somebody sabotaging him actively, calling into companies about deals that were about to close and actively sabotaging deals in the
Wow.
final. And so that's when, yeah.
So what did the bur what did
They actually took almost everything except for our youngest child's items, clothes and toys of hers. They did not take. They took almost everything. Jewelry, I had put like really nice jewelry in there, which was really dumb. But when we were traveling, Richard said,
Mhm.
don't take anything of value. It'll get stolen. It'll be safer in storage. Well, nothing got stolen while we were traveling, but it got stolen out of storage.
Something like that
Really
happened to
nice.
me once at a very minor scale, but exactly the same thing. I left an engagement ring, and I came back and it had been stolen from my apartment. Anyway, um,
Yeah. So like everything we bought for the kids, their beds, their bedding towels, TVs, mattresses, just all the new items we'd purchased since the fire. So it was just devastating again, but we still had all our
so
children and we're grateful for
yeah,
that.
material possessions can be
Right.
replaced. This is the sort of thing you tell yourself in those moments, those terrible, horrible moments. Um,
Exactly.
let me pause though. I mean, okay, so now we're up to the point where Richard has been informed that there is an active sabotage attempt on him from within his own company. But let me just back this up because it just occurred to me. I've never been a golf fan and I don't know anything about golf, but like I find it very striking, like that. I mean, I know it's such a beloved sport in the States and it's such a huge part of like business communities and where things are done and it's just a big deal, right? I mean,
Mhm.
I'm trying to put together the sort of discrepancy, or not discrepancy, but like the contrast, right? Between this man who has this picture perfect life, who everything he touches sort of turns to gold. But tell me about the golf element of this, of his life before all of this terrible stuff happened.
Yeah, I mean, we just had a storybook life. Like he was very successful, very innovative. People loved what he did because he basically figured out how to combine the love of golf with sales because all these golfers are going out and pitching each other all day. That's why they
Mhm.
tea time at 4, let's talk business or whatever. And so he figured out how to make a business out of that. I wish I could explain it, but I can't explain much about what my husband does. He's pretty much just a genius. But he's also, I have to say, his dad and him are one of the kindest people ever. He's also the man that will be, talking to homeless people. He'll sit down with a homeless person and talk to them and get their whole life story for an hour and come back. He did this once when we were visiting Chicago and we were married. I said, where have you been? I was starting to worry about you. And he said, he was getting takeout and he said, oh, you wouldn't believe this guy's story. I was like, what guy? And then he will remember every detail to this day. He really cares about others and he's generous to a fault,
Right.
which is what
So,
back to his
is he
business.
still known in the golf community? I mean, is that something that he is
Well,
still part of, or
he wasn't like a PGA famous person in
right,
the States. So, yes, he keeps in touch with his golf, you know, buddies from Asia, and he did play in the States. But when we met and got engaged, he decided it was a very, being a PGA player is a really hard lifestyle. It's very lonely. And he just decided it wasn't the life for him going forward when we got engaged. And that's when he pretty much started the golf business right when we got married.
right, okay, yeah, that
And
makes
so
sense.
he did that, I think, until, I don't know, give or take 2000.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
So, when you guys find out about the attempts to sabotage these deals from inside the company, what happened then? Like, what was your reaction?
Uh, I was horrified. I had a good sense of
Did
who
you
it
feel
was.
like your suspicions were validated?
Uh, I would not go there for years, and I still try not to go there too much because it's just horrifying. And there's so many other things that are facts that are horrifying that I have to
Right,
just I have to digest those first. But yeah, we didn't find out about the sabotage of his company until about 6 months after the burglary. And then about 2 months after we found that out, Richard sued them. And then that's when things got really crazy. We had moved back to Charlotte, and me and the kids are getting followed by kind of, I call them fake PIs, just trying to, I guess the purpose was to intimidate, and just things got really weird when we moved back to Charlotte. And then in 2000, so this lawsuit happened in 2018, and the judge involved clearly knew the defendants because in the first hearing, they said, "Hello, Your Honor. Please tell. It's so good to see you again. Please tell your wife we say hello." And Richard and I are so trusting at this time, so naive, totally believed in the judicial system. And Richard thought, oh, well, he'd recuse himself if it was going to make him biased. And so Richard and his COO, Greg, just went on their merry way and thought, okay, that's just the way it works. And if they had any bias, of course they would do the right thing and recuse themselves. And so about a year or two later, I run into this judge in a restaurant, and we're sitting next to the civil business judge that's on this case. And
the
I
judge
say to
in
Richard,
your husband's case, you're sitting next to him.
yes, in this very small, intimate
Okay,
restaurant in Charlotte. And I say, oh my gosh, well, we've got to say hi. It'd be so weird and rude not to. And Richard said, I don't think we can. And I said, well, I'm going to, because that's just weird. Like I can hear they're talking about golf. We can hear what they're saying. We're elbows away. It was just awkward and Richard does everything by the book. And he's like, well, I don't think that's appropriate. And I don't know that we can. And I said, well, I'm absolutely going to. I was raised to always acknowledge who you know in the room. And so when everybody was standing up to leave, and I said, "Hi, I'm Megan Brasser. Um, and I know you're Judge Bledsoe, and I'm Megan Brasser." And Richard said, "Hi, I'm your plaintiff in the business case." And wouldn't you know, within the week or so, we get this announcement from the judge that he ran into us
hmm,
to everybody in the case had to be alerted. And he said there was nothing but an introduction and nothing was talked about and nothing was said, but he had to make sure everybody knew that. And that's the first time I went, well, why didn't you let us know how you knew the defendants? Why are we not getting the
mm-hmm,
same rules here?
right,
So that was definitely a moment of, huh.
right. So, how did the lawsuit go?
So that was interesting. It's still going on. It
Oh,
has not. Okay, so Richard sued in 2018. 2020 was COVID. 2020 was also when they started the federal investigation at the hands of the defendants. And they started the investigation of my husband in 2020. And since this was going on, it all got stayed. And then
okay,
I have been added to
okay.
the lawsuit. I personally have been added to the lawsuit as a third party defendant for speaking my truth. But
Wow.
now Bledsoe has retired and we have a new judge. And so I'm grateful for that.
Okay, so right, well, this is where we get into the real meat here.
Right.
the part of the story which has led to this, like, enormous personal crisis that is about to happen.
Right.
So, your husband sues the is it the investors?
It's an investor and his wife.
Okay. Were they weren't on the board, were they?
He was, yes.
He was. Okay.
The wife was not involved at all, but she
Okay.
was definitely
So
involved.
so on the grounds of that, they're of the sabotage, right? So they somehow managed to turn this around into a criminal case against your husband?
Yes. So in
Okay.
July 2020, he was served through his civil attorneys, he was served a subject letter. So in federal investigations, you can be a witness, a subject, or a target. A witness means you don't need a criminal defense attorney necessarily or any attorney necessarily. Subject, it could go either way. You could end up being a witness, you could end up being nothing, or you could end up being a target, and then target's a target. So Richard and Greg were never given any letters personally. And they were given on July 17th, I believe, 2020, a subject letter to R Factor that R Factor was being investigated for drug crimes. I think it was bank crimes and I believe investment fraud. And so Greg and Richard and his attorneys just thought, well, that's crazy. It's probably the same people that have been claiming all sorts of stuff. And because we were also learning about a smear campaign going around Charlotte saying, oh, Richard's just shady and, just country club gossip. And I just thought, who could know him for 5 minutes or our family and not know he's the real deal? But, so we were just learning about all this at the same time. And we get this subject letter, but we honestly were not that concerned because we just thought it was so ridiculous. And we did
Why
not
the drugs
understand.
charge?
We have no idea. He's a tech guy running this like really small company with maybe 12 people. They're not tech. The tech industry is not exactly known for like drug rings.
No.
But yeah, the nature of this case it's just been one accusation after another and none of them stick. So they just keep coming throughout the investigation. It went from all those three to then it was mortgage fraud, wire fraud, bank fraud. He's hiding money overseas. I can't even list. There's too many, like maybe dozens of crimes that we had to pay attorneys to defend and show evidence of how it wasn't true.
And that worked, right? I mean, in the sense that he was acquitted or absolved or the charges were dropped or whatever. Tell me what happened.
Yes, everything, nothing would stick. We spent hundreds of thousands of dollars. And when you spend money defending nothing, you never get that money back. When you're in a federal
Mhm.
investigation, they could, accuse us of 20 more crimes if they wanted to. And we would just have to get attorneys and defend it. And so the design is to bleed you out.
Were they getting the charges even made? Because surely you have to pass some sort of basic, you know, sniff test, and that, like, if you go to law enforcement and say, I'm accused, if I went to law enforcement and said, accuse some random person of a crime, they would be like, where is your evidence? On what basis were they even making the charges? Never mind bringing them, all the way.
Well, this is where it gets really interesting. There was no typical protocol, but me and you couldn't do it this way. You would have to be pretty high up but if you have a friend, let's say that works at the DOJ in Charlotte, let's say his name's Ryan, and you just call up Ryan and you say you're really mad at Richard Brasser. Ryan says, hey, no evidence needed. Just all stick to the same story. Say he did Ponzi schemes. Say he's like the, Madoff of Charlotte. And hey, if they don't take the case at the FBI after all my great coaching, then I'll have them take a second look at it here at the U.S. Attorney's Office. And that's in their own
Wow.
writing. They put this in emails. So we definitely, and the government has admitted, so once it finally went to taxes, and we're now defending taxes that have already been paid and self reported, the government admitted that they took it from dirty hands and that they never even took it from the IRS. The IRS never referred it for prosecution. So they
Okay,
never
so
denied.
this is the first time we're actually mentioning the IRS, I think. So,
Okay.
well, anyway, yeah. Start. How did this end up an IRS crime,
So when
quote
nothing else
unquote?
was Yes. Yeah, very true. So, yeah, so when nothing else was sticking and they had absolutely nothing, no evidence of anything, like I said, Richard does everything by the book. He hires everything out. Like, he's the sales guy, he's the visionary. He never even logged into their financial system. He hires all that. He has since he was 17, even for his personal taxes. So nothing else was sticking. And I believe it was at the reverse the prosecutor Finley told Richard's lawyers she takes this case very personally.
Who said that?
The prosecutor Finley, she told our attorneys on numerous occasions and that she takes this case, all of the attorneys, very personally. And that although investment fraud is no longer on her heart, she's going to go after Richard for taxes. And she doesn't care if they've already been paid. And coincidentally, she used to work at Maine Tax in Washington, D.C.
What's that?
So that's her specialty. Her niche is taxes.
Okay.
So from about that point on, we also had every step of the way, we've had attorneys, tax lawyers, accountants, all of them in Charlotte have said, I've never seen anything like this. I mean, it they've just been totally perplexed.
Wow.
So he was in voluntary disclosure program starting in 2016 when we had our fire and burglary and they couldn't figure out why these deals weren't closing. His COO fell behind in paying taxes because he was trying to save the jobs of the employees and thought, well, I'll just account for it. We'll tell the IRS like what's happening. The IRS accepted them into the program, no problem. Great communication all the way up until about the time my husband sued this couple.
And this is the
And
self-disclosure program, right?
yep, it's called the Voluntary Disclosure Program in the IRS. And
And
so
it's designed for people who want to do the right thing but are in difficulty, is that right?
exactly, it explicitly gives them permission to pay other company bills to keep their company afloat so that they can keep going and eventually pay the IRS.
Wow, okay.
So when Richard started losing these deals that were supposed to pay the IRS, he would just
Right.
communicate to them, I don't know what's going on, but I didn't get this deal. And then after the lawsuit, he said, I found out it's being sabotaged. So here's what I'm going to do. I bought a house for my family after the fire. I'm going to put a lien. He's like, my name's not even on the house, but I'm going to put my name on the deed and you can put a lien on it to guarantee your payment in full. So he did that around 2019, 2020. And then
Okay.
he finds out um, by 2020, the end of 2022 is when we really figure out that they're going for these taxes that had already been paid back by 2021.
Wow. And was this on the basis of this particular prosecutor, do you think?
Yes.
Right. Can you talk more about that?
Well, I know for sure that in interviews with attorneys that they said they've never seen the agent West or the prosecutor Finley. They said they've never seen people more dug in, more vindictive, not taking any advice. They were just in this to win it. Facts didn't matter. Documents were manipulated. Like she literally hid dates while she'd say he knew this was due because it was sent to his address. Well, then she'd hide the fact that it was sent to our burnt down house and
Right.
nobody was living there. So there was just a lot of manipulation of documents, which we would quickly figure out. And so then she would switch to something else. There's reason to believe that, you know, something's just really wrong from beginning
Right.
to end in this
Well,
entire case.
let's get into that part of it toward the end because so did when you first found out about that they were going after this tax element, did you just assume, well, that maybe that's just an administrative error. Of course, we can clear this up, no problem. Or have you started to be really sort of like thick skinned and like, okay, what the hell is happening here? Was it something in between? Like, what were your thoughts when you found out it was this already paid off or already disclosed tax issue?
Honestly, I was thinking, okay, so they know my husband's has nothing to do with the finance side of the business, but they won't stop looking at my husband. They didn't care about Greg, the COO, Greg Getner, who was also a co-defendant in all of this. And so I thought, what is this really about? I have common sense and this just doesn't make any sense. So I've known it's a witch hunt for years.
Okay.
There's nothing else that makes sense.
Is Greg, the co-defendant's COO, is he also going to jail?
Yes, he just got released, actually. He went
Okay.
for 6 months. He did recently share with us, was kind of a bombshell. We knew that the prosecutor and the agent were talking to his attorney on the side, but we have since learned that they offered him misdemeanors if he would give them, stick to one of their narratives about Richard.
Wow. That's crazy, and he didn't take it? He didn't take the
No,
deal?
nope. He said he wasn't going to lie and that he's the one that didn't pay the taxes. And
But
Richard and
presumably
him,
he also was the one in the self-disclosure program, right? It was both of them?
yep, they were both, Richard's the responsible party as the CEO and then the
Yeah.
COO. Yeah. And so nobody could believe they were actually going to go through with this. We can't find one other conviction like this in the United States. Not even we have 6 circumstances. We can't find anything like it. We can't even find one with 3 of the circumstances, like attorneys the whole
Wow.
time. Um, Never kicked out from the voluntary disclosure program and paid in full. We can't even find that, let alone the other additional factors, let alone the fact that Judge Cogburn, there's no way that he's ever had in his federal courtroom a tax case from the voluntary disclosure program that's already been paid. That in the
Right.
same quarter's charge, they also had a fire and another quarter was a burglary, yet they claimed lifestyle.
What do you mean?
So, in the indictment of my husband, they did a 20-page, just complete smear campaign of Richard, where they were trying because he was also charged and ultimately acquitted on evasion and fraudulent filing tax. What do you call it? Filing false tax returns. And so, he was found not guilty of that based on the evidence by the jury. But the indictment of him was an entire smear campaign. For example, they said things like Megan and Richard were off living the dream. They belonged to a country club in Charlotte and they were spending all this money. We've never belonged to a country club in Charlotte. My husband's a golfer, but he had a golf business and he has a golf club that he goes to. And so that was flat out lies. They said that I was out while Richard owed all these taxes. His wife was out buying lavish furniture, um, and clothing and all this stuff. And they don't mention that our house just burnt down and we
Right.
didn't even have beds or a refrigerator or a washing machine.
Right.
And furthermore, it's so embarrassing to them because they have no rights to our insurance money. The IRS cannot claim your insurance money after a catastrophe. They had
Right.
0 rights to that. So it's so shocking that this can happen in our country. Like I just
Right.
never would have believed it. And it was so gutless. And for the judge to sit through that trial and now do the sentencing he has done, he may have started unwittingly, but he is part of this.
Yeah, so let's talk about this sentence. So your husband declares this problem, is given this sort of grace program, as is his COO, and then finds out that the federal prosecutor in your area is coming after him for this tax issue. And you go through a trial,
Mhm.
and
5-day
he's acquitted
trial.
on 5-day trial. And he's acquitted on a bunch of other charges, right?
The most
The
serious ones,
evasion and stuff
totally.
like that.
Yep,
Yeah.
totally acquitted. They originally wanted 38 years for my husband to put him
Oh
away for
my
38 years.
goodness. Oh my goodness. And what year was the trial?
It was 2024. Is March
Oh, okay.
2024. And at the
Okay.
end of after the verdict was read, the judge said he's never seen a case like this in his courtroom, and I'm sure he hasn't, and that he had no appetite for prison. And so we really were like, okay, the judge gets how insane this is. Especially without any evasion, any of the bad character stuff is totally off the table. There's no way he's going to send a paid off tax guy. It just made no sense. So we just totally expected when we went a year later to the sentencing hearing, the lawyers were not prepared at all for a total flip. I mean, we were negotiating if we can get credit cards again, because when you're a felon, you can't get even credit cards. They just totally take you out of the game of Monopoly. You can't they tell you to pay your rent and then
Wow.
they can't, you can't get a job. It's insane. I feel so bad for people in the system that are way less educated than us because we barely stood a chance, and it's just so eye-opening. But yeah,
Yeah.
so at this sentencing hearing, he judge did a complete unexpected 180 and said there's no way he can't give them an active sentence as some sort of deterrent, especially considering the lifestyle that we were living. And we were like, are you talking about like before this group of people came into our life? Because, yeah, we did have a beautiful lifestyle way before 2015, 16. But the lifestyle while we were on Medicaid, I was like, maybe
Wow.
the government needs to start talking to the other hand because that's not supported. And then the judge tried to present it as they only paid because the hammer was coming down. And the IRS was literally already paid with the lien on our house. So they were guaranteed payment either way. So there was no hammer coming. And then the judge said, well, this is one of the judges in our country that on retired when Trump got
Uh,
in, got elected.
yeah.
And so
In
I think that
2024 or 2016?
in 24, he unretired. So he came back from retirement to do the sentencing hearing, and he made a couple innuendos to politics
Okay,
that,
can we talk about that?
yeah, I don't have the exact quotes before me, but
That's okay.
it was something like if the tooth fairy's not going to pay for all this, so I guess we have to have the IRS. It was interesting.
So, yeah, I mean, this is so I think a lot of people, anyone who uh, even has followed Trump with an impartial mind, or anyone who, and basically everyone who is sort of like a part of the MAGA base, in my opinion, will find this story completely believable because for the last, well, I mean, I've been following this since 2020, so 6 years, but other people for much longer. We've been, we've we've all seen stories and cases of basically miscarriages of justice, which is what, in my opinion, you are experiencing and you are a victim of. And these miscarriages of justice are carried out by a thoroughly weaponized administrative bureaucracy, with tremendous power, especially when you're talking about U.S. attorneys and their prosecutorial powers. I mean, there isn't really a way to withstand the onslaught to the point where even if you are vindicated, you've been ruined in the process. And it's not just in the States. I mean, here in the UK, a lot of women who have sued or been sued over speaking up about men and women's changing rooms and stuff like that, they have this phrase, the process is the punishment. And, it's almost
100%.
like if you have for whatever reason, someone's decided to set their sights on you, you are going to suffer. It doesn't matter what the outcome is because in the process of the administrative, the administrative process playing out, you will have your life completely destroyed. But this story is like such an extreme example of that. I mean, especially with the house fire and the burglary and all of these additional details, that is just so astonishing to me.
The prosecutor wanted me to get my own criminal defense attorney. That was a way of intimidation, clearly. Had no involvement in my husband's company. There was zero reason for me to have to hire a criminal defense attorney. But they also had my husband's father, who was 89 years old, as the star witness on the stand. They tried to pit father against son because he financially helped us out during these crises of fire, burglary, sabotage of his company, having to personally pay off a company tax debt, having to pay upwards. We've paid close to $1 million in legal defense costs. And then they get my father-in-law, who again is one of the kindest people and not in good health. He has a walker. They fly him in from Nashville to be their star witness. And absolutely none of it made any sense. There were points in the trial I thought I was in a dark comedy skit. Like, my own family was like, this can't be how things are really run. This cannot be true. I mean, there were so many things you just can't make up. They were just going down my credit card list of things I buy as if you're a criminal to go to the grocery store with your kids and buy clothes. And the jurors, thank God, had heads on their shoulders and did not fall for any of it, but it's like they were just trying to bore him to tears, so they would just see dollar signs, dollar signs, dollar signs, and say, "Hey, put the white rich guy away." That was the
Mhm.
whole point of just the endless nothing being presented.
So speaking of the jury, so while you were going through this, especially the trial and the sentencing, how has the I mean, presumably you've been in Charlotte for years, you were part of the community. What's the community reaction been? And have you found any support there? I mean, even if it's just moral support.
You know, we've learned a lot through this process on the human nature side of things. And shockingly, we've found that the people that support you aren't the ones that you would have ever guessed. The ones that come running like with these like secret capes you never knew about are the last people
Mhm.
you expected. And then the people that have known you and you've held their babies and they've held your and they were just nowhere to be
Yeah.
found. It was easier for them to believe that I guess I'm in denial or I'm losing it. Like there's no way this many bad things can
Right.
happen to one person. So I guess it was easier that for them to believe the government's narrative than to believe the facts as they have lived beside them knowing me.
That's a very
Or
interesting point, actually.
or they're very
Yeah, go on.
scared. They're also very scared, you know.
Of
This
what?
is well, I mean, we did have a lot of friends joke, like, "We'll talk to you when this is over. We haven't paid our taxes in years." I mean, it's all, you know, it's all sorts of things that this brings up for people. This is a really scary situation. So everybody's gonna have a little bit of a different reason. But a lot of people just, you know, they just want to believe whatever the government tells you and go get your booster shot and, you know, whatever. The government is like, they have our best interests at heart. If they're doing this to the brassers, they have a good there's something we don't
Right.
know. There's something we don't know.
Yeah, and it's true. People have a real hard time facing down, let's just say evil, which might sound
Mhm.
like a kind of an extreme word, but anything that's sort of like any kind of sort of negative force
Right.
that you can't quite, like that you can't quite easily explain. And I have found that people really want to look away
Yes.
because it's engenders so much fear in the people who aren't suffering from the misfortune. It's like, and it makes them embarrassed. I think the reason I'm looking at my phone is because I just started that series Bible in a Year. And
Oh,
I just started that at the beginning of the year. And there was a line from the book of Job, which was very apt to this and really it just stayed with me. I was walking my dog when I was listening to it, and I got my phone out and I put it in an email to remind myself. And it is, in the thought of those who are at ease, there is contempt for misfortune, but misfortune is ready for those whose feet slip. So let that be a lesson to everyone that, there but for the grace of God go I is another way of saying that. And
yes.
when you are in the depths of just the worst, it's incredible how many people flee from you, not
Yes. Yes.
come to your aid.
Yes.
And yeah, and then suddenly strangers will present themselves, or new people will present themselves. And that's something, people, I think, during COVID and during the whole political division that we've experienced, a lot of people have experienced that. But it's going off on a tangent.
Right.
But I mean, are there other reasons people might be afraid in Charlotte? Like, what's going on there?
You know, Trump is all over Charlotte's case right now, and there's a reason. Are you familiar with the Irina Zarutska
Oh,
um,
yes, of course.
refugee that was killed, slaughtered on
That's right.
our light rail? So that's 2 miles from our home.
Oh,
So, you
wow.
know, Charlotte's claiming they don't have resources to put people like this murderer away after 12, 14 arrests, but they were spending millions following me and my children trying to find anything on us. So I'm not yeah,
Wow.
Charlotte's moral compass it needs
Is it
to
a
come back.
Democrat-run city?
Yes, for sure. Yes. And I just don't think this would have happened 10 years ago even. There's just
Yeah. Why is
yeah.
that?
There's just they have done so many things that are illegal from even the no subpoena, no target letter from the very beginning to the very end. And I just don't think the media won't report on it here. It's like everybody's in bed together. And I didn't know before all this, lawyers, prosecutors, judges, they all go to the same events and talk about, you know, how you doing? And it's the defendants that um, have no chance, but they're all going to do great. The prosecutor eventually makes millions as a criminal defense attorney. And we just had no idea the way the system was designed and um, stacked.
That's so interesting. This U.S. Attorney's Office, are they being looked at in particular, or is it just the sort of wider city administration?
I really don't know. There is a report to Congress about this particular group of people calling for an investigation. In my husband's case and in general, I mean, if this is who you're targeting and you want a data for who's been Charlotte's Entrepreneur of the Year, if this is who you need to get off the streets, we
Right. In the
really
same city where this man knifed a beautiful young woman in the neck as she sat there defenseless, and your husband's
exactly.
going to jail.
Yep. And there's another case that involves the same judge, actually. Shanquella Robinson. I don't know if you remember this case. It was around the time they were indicting my husband here, but the FBI here said they didn't have enough evidence to prosecute for a murder or even manslaughter. But this was a group of 6 charlatans that went down to Mexico, down to Cabo. And you may remember it was a video that went viral. And this innocent woman, 25, Shanquella Robinson, steps out of the shower naked, fenceless, and her friend comes out of nowhere while her other friends are recording it and attacked her viciously and just started beating her up. And she just fell to the floor, never defended herself. And her body came back to Charlotte and they called it alcohol poisoning. And the DOJ here said they didn't have enough evidence to prosecute. And so the family sued. And this judge, Cogburn, that's on Richard's federal case, he basically, I don't know that he's going to let the family sue the government. I don't know where it's at right now, but last I heard, it was not looking good for her family. And I'm just sitting here thinking, this girl is dead. They at least know she was violated viciously. They have like an
They
assault
have
case.
video of it?
Yes. And
And
these
it was the
people are
same judge?
yep. And these people are running around Charlotte with new names. These 6 people involved, they all have new names. They probably have credit cards. We can't get, we can't get it, but and I'm just like, and they want my husband. What in God's name is going on? It just
That's
makes
crazy.
it's just, and it's so sad for the family. Like, no justice. I hope they get it. And I hope there's a
How old
full
was this young woman?
25.
Oh my goodness, what a terrible crime.
I know.
So, in your opinion, what is really driving this?
Everybody wants to know why. And yeah, exactly what you're asking. In my opinion, I think there's some elite people behind it, and it's just from Wall Street. I think it's a classic weaponization of the federal government to do their bidding on them for free, basically, terrorize our innocent family and deplete us financially and make us feel like criminals.
But why you?
I think what started out as greed and envy became, I think some people, I mean, Richard is an amazing man. And I think some insecure men didn't feel quite great around him. And maybe their wife thought Richard was great. I honestly can't say why. I don't even know if I wanna know why. It's so
Huh.
cruel, for somebody who has Richard is just such a people pleaser. He'd do anything for anybody. He's like that sweet dog, like, that just jumps up. He's just always, like, so loving. He does not see evil. We were incredibly naive, told everybody everything. So that's one of our lessons of how this happened to us. I mean, he would tell people about the deals about to close and, the house we're about to sell. So I guess maybe that made us easier targets, like somebody that brilliant to know what they're up to next and to try to steal his technology. They definitely were after the technology. They had a plan to take all the 35 investors out of Richard's company, like dilute them by starving out the company. And then this group of investors would take over the company, which that's very, very unethical, but it happens every day. And it's not necessarily illegal until they went to illegal means to do it to Richard. But so they definitely it was greed. They wanted the technology to the small group of people and they didn't want to share. So I just think But I can't, what I really can't answer is why the feds would not want to interview the 35 families, not want to know, like Richard worked with companies like Microsoft, SAP, Century 21, Forbes. Why wouldn't they go, why did they love this narrative with zero evidence and never went to the other investors, never went to all these great companies, never wanted the truth? They just clutched into this nothing and then wouldn't let it go. And to the point that it's like the first tax conviction in US history.
Can you talk to me a little bit about the prosecutor? We're going to close. We're going to finish up in a little while, but can you talk to me about the prosecutor? Do you think it was down to her, and why would that be? If you do think that,
It was definitely down to her. We were told by people in Washington, D.C. that worked with her and they're really high up that we have the only prosecutor in the United States that would have touched this tax case. But because she's so experienced, I think 20 to 30 years, she really knows how to manipulate things. I think some inside favors, it's my opinion, some inside favors were pulled because things like we would log in to try to pay. Richard would try to pay his personal taxes because his attorney would call and say he can't. And Richard's like, well, I'll just log in to my thing. Just, and I'm sure I can. Every citizen can pay their own taxes, but the links would be blocked, just very mysterious things. I mean, we screenshotted all of it and took evidence every step of the way. But I think the prosecutor, I don't know what was in it for her or if she just needs to win because she spent millions falling for a false narrative that she couldn't stand down out of embarrassment. I don't know, but I know she was very unprofessional. When I started speaking up to my family and friends and raising money for Richard's case so we could pay legal fees, she took him to court and tried to jail him before trial. And they had a whole hearing about me. And thankfully, we live in the United States and freedom of speech is a right. And the magistrate judge stood up for that. And thank God. But yeah, she's definitely wanting to win this. Oh, another thing that happened, Richard just, if he's going to do something, he's going to figure out how everything works. Like if he's going to be a barista, which he just learned in the last 6 months, he's going to take the humidity of the beans and he dissects everything. He doesn't know how to half-ass anything. He's sorry to swear, but he's just like, has to do everything all the way. And so when he got indicted, he started going, well, I know nothing about the system. I'm just going to start going to federal courthouses and learning everything I can. If I'm in a sword fight, I'm just going to go start watching these trials. Well, the prosecutor calls his attorney at the time. He's like, why is your client in my courtroom? And he wasn't just going to hers. He was just walking down to Charlotte's federal courthouse and going to any trial he could to figure out how it works. Like he didn't know the language. He wanted to study it all. And
which is smart.
he's brilliant. That's why he can, figure out things faster than the average bear because he takes so much time and learns it. And so his attorney called and basically Richard was scolded and told not to return. It's open to the public. Like, what are they hiding down there that we are not supposed to see?
Well, that's the question. I mean, okay, so this is like, we're really at the final stages of this now.
Mm-hmm.
And your family is about to undergo this terrible ordeal, like the final part of it. What are they hiding? I mean, what is it? Like, really, what is it? I mean, I understand the community a little bit better. I understand community motivations because of just what you're talking about, envy, resentment, all that stuff, money. But I don't understand the motivation of people who are, they're paid to do a million other cases. Like like you're in a city where a helpless woman was stabbed in the neck. I mean, they have bigger fish to fry. So
Exactly.
that is the most mysterious part to me. Like, why would the DOJ, and it makes sense that the DOJ would be weaponized against Donald Trump because they're political enemies. That makes sense, but not in the case of your family. What is it? What is it about this case that has made them so tenacious to the point of being cruel?
Yeah, it's even more sadistic than I've shared. I don't know because we're not political. Like we're registered independents. We've never been politically involved. So I know it's not that. I just think that these people that we sued are very politically involved and can pull some strings behind the curtains and a lot of people that may have believed them pulled these strings really thinking that Richard was a horrible person. But I think it just grew and grew and grew. And now you've got this tax case that is the first in US history and makes no sense to anybody. And somebody's got to answer for it. My four children's father going to prison for it is only going to make the questions bigger. I mean, this isn't going away. This isn't going to age well if he
That's a
goes
really
away.
Yeah, I think that's a very high note to end on. But before we do actually stop recording, I mean, without wanting to pry, I mean, how are you guys coping? How are his parents coping? How are your kids coping? I mean, I'm trying to put myself in your shoes and it's hard. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, we're really strong. We have really strong faith. We have really great family. We have really great friends. We have a really great sense of humor. My youngest child is just her and her friends, hadn't told her until about 2 weeks ago because it's just such a big adult problem. Why she's living her best life. But her response with her friends is like, this can't even be true. Like, he's the carpool dad everybody loves. He plays soccer with them. They're like, why would somebody make this up that he's a bad guy? Why do they need dad to be a bad guy? And I just said, honey, I wish I knew, but I just don't know. But we're just going to keep the faith that the truth will come out. And we're so grateful for all the people that care and that they want to know why too, because if this can happen to us, it can happen to them. Like, no American taxpayer that's ever been on any sort of payment plan or ever paid late could now be a felon with this case standing.
That's incredible. Yeah. So tell me how can people, if they want to get involved in some way, what can they do to help your family? Is there petitions to sign, or what's your plan of action here?
So if they go on justiceforrichard.com, there's a whole video that's a 5-minute video that they can share with others so that they don't have to watch this whole thing. They could just share the story in 5 minutes. And it just takes you through kind of the nitty gritty of how weird this tax case is. And then they can also write on it's very easy in 2 clicks of a button on Justice for Richard. They can send a pardon letter to Trump. And then I always just say, whatever your specialty is, if you're a CPA, spread this around, like educate people. Or if you're an investigator and you want some more facts, reach out. We've got so much overwhelming evidence about how over the top and ridiculous this has gotten. And
Well, actually, that reminds me. The final cruelty here is that Richard is being sent to a medium security prison, right?
yes, that's another huge, huge thing nobody's explaining. The judge recommended a halfway house or a federal camp, which is what his CO, Greg Gettner, did. And then Richard mysteriously got upgraded a few levels. Now, like, let's take Bernie Madoff, served his time here in Charlotte. The crime was up in New York, but he served here, or not Charlotte, sorry, North Carolina, and at Butner Detention Center. And he served where Greg ended up serving in a federal camp. Well, Richard is in medium security, which is among, gangs and violence. And so my husband's life is now at risk. If it wasn't before, it definitely is now. And so over a paid back tax, like, it's just, the blood is all over this town on this case. It's just so out of control,
Yeah,
ridiculous.
I'm fact checking myself here before I make a statement. Is he going out of state?
Yes, he's going to South Carolina.
Okay. And how does that work for you guys? I mean, how does this even work? Are you
I have no I have no idea. I'm 1 hour at a time these days. Thank God. And my parents and his dad are just as big of victims as everybody else. We should all be having the time of our lives in their retirements. And this is just all so consuming for our family. They're worried nonstop. It's taken an impact on their health. And for what? At the end of the day, there's no victim. Like, what are they getting out of this? Taking my husband out of his home for a year and putting him in a jail cell. How does that benefit any American?
Yeah, there's no victim here. That's exactly right.
Mhm.
Well, Megan, listen, my thoughts are certainly going to be with you, not just this week, but going forward. I'm really, I'm just, with that expression, sort of, I'm not surprised, but I'm still shocked. That is,
Yeah.
That is how your case sort of looks to me. I've certainly been the last 4, 5, 6 years just on one thing after another that has taken away my faith in, elites generally, and not just in the States, also in the UK where I live, in Ireland, and, um, America is just sort of like the biggest example of it.
Mhm.
But this has to be one of the worst I've heard. So my thoughts are with you and your family. And just give them the name of your website again before we end it.
Justiceforrichard.com. And thank you so much for putting light on this. It really helps us keep believing that people care and truth will prevail.
Thank you. Thank you, Megan, for your time.
Thank you so much.